he was, and a husband, and he was. But I'm going to give you a different side of Billy, because I've known him since 1962, and I probably know more about him in terms of what he really thought and really liked than probably just about anyone, because we were best friends for all these years. I met Billy in 1962, and I remember that then they called him Eddie. You know, Eddie, I guess, as he got older, wasn't cool, so they changed it to Billy. But they, I just realized it wasn't on, so I spoke right into it. So I remember it was the teacher came over, Mrs. Giambalvo, and she sat him next to me and said, "This is the new boy in our class. His name is Eddie. Will you have lunch with him and will you be his friend?" And I remember at the time we had beans and franks and sauerkraut, and the milk I think was 3 cents. The whole lunch was about 30 cents. And I was 7, I didn't have much better to do. So I said, sure, I'll hang with him for a while. And that hanging lasted for 56 years. So we were friends and did just about everything together in our youth, including all the trouble we got into, which I'll delve into a little bit. The thing about Billy was, besides being just a great guy and a very fun guy to be around, he had 2 qualities that I really haven't seen anybody else to the extent. The first quality was generous. When I mean generous, I mean like the time he stole his father's coins and took everyone to the pizza place, and he got a good beating for that. But he was always the one to pick up the tab. He was always the one to pay for everything. I mean, that was just his style. But his biggest thing was his curiosity. I mean, if he ever went, college, and he would have been a great industrial engineer. He always wanted to know how stuff worked. And the thing I remember most about Billy is that every time I'd see him after school, it'd be, "I got something really cool I got to show you." And I learned so much from him. Did you know that goldfish eat marijuana seeds and they get high? I had no idea. And also, if you wanted to get high yourself, you could actually do it on Dr. Scholl's foot powder. I didn't know that either. So we were just real adventurous kids. I mean, there was nothing we didn't try, nothing we didn't do. I mean, and his sense of just how things worked. I mean, I remember the time he said to me, I was studying the construction of swimming pools, these above ground pools. And he said, "Do you realize that the way this scene works, if you shoot it with a gun, the thing's just going to explode?" And I said, "Nah, that's not possible." Well, we did 2 pools that night. It just flooded the neighborhood. It was great. We just shot it right to scene, like he said. They just blew up just like he said. So he really had a great sense of adventure. I mean, he always had boats and cars and motorcycles. And he just loved life. People say to me, he died so young, but he just lived every day of his life. I think he actually died exactly when he was supposed to, which I think is going to happen to all of us. He just really loved his life. I mean, we were kidding the last couple of days, because I saw him the last couple of days before he died. And he said, I might be dying. I said, I just hope you go like my grandfather, peacefully in his sleep. Not like the 6 people screaming in the back of his car as he went up the cliff. he really got, I have so many stories about Bill. I just wrote down like the top 30 of them that I can think of. But he really was a compassionate soul. And his curiosity, I'll never forget, we were at my house, and I had this grandmother who was, she got older, her mind wasn't all there. And she said to Bill and I, "Do you realize the cat plays so nice with the hamster?" And it was one of my sister's hamster. And Bill said, "A cat with a hamster? Is this even possible?" He said, "We have to give it a shot." So we took the hamster out. Within 5 seconds, his neck was broken in the cat's mouth. And we were like, well, this didn't work out well. So we didn't know what to do, because it was my little sister's hamster. She was about 6 years old. So Billy said, "I have an idea." So he grabs the dead hamster and he puts it in his pocket. We go down to Woolworth where they sell hamsters, and there we are, and I've got the cage open, and I'm lifting up live hamsters, and he's got the dead one in his hand, and we're comparing them side by side to see if we can get the markings right. So after picking up about 20 hamsters, and I mean, they're screaming in the store, "This guy's got a dead hamster." They think he's actually killing the hamsters in the place. So we bring the hamsters, I bring the hamster home, and put it in the cage, and he's just downstairs, and within 5 seconds we hear this shriek, this scream. Turns out my sister actually knew all the markings on the real hamster, and she was able to tell we did something. So that was kind of his sense of adventure, but also his sense of wanting to just do right. He really enjoyed people. There's so many myths about him that people don't really understand. Like, I've heard people say, well, he wasn't a really religious guy. He actually was. He had a tremendous sense of trying to think of what happens in the afterlife, and especially after his mother died. And he really had a deep sense of religion. In fact, at one point, he said he was going to convert to become Jewish. And he really seriously wanted to do that. Now, I happen to have been born Jewish. I don't really practice it anymore. But when he said he was going to become Jewish, every time I'd read in the paper about some rabbi that swindled or whatever, I'd call him up and I'd say, it's your people did it. I'd call him a heave and all kinds of things. So we always tease each other. In the 56 years I knew him, I don't think there was a full month that went by when we didn't talk or exchange, later on emails or different things. But he just really loved life. In fact, one of the things he was fascinated with was actually the Baptists and the Holy Rollers, and he wanted to see what that was like. And we were drinking in Greenwich Village till about 5 in the morning. I think that's when the last bar closed, the next one opened at 7, so we knew we had 2 hours to do something else. So we finished up drinking in Greenwich Village, and we decided to go up to Harlem. We figured that's probably pretty safe at 7 in the morning. We went into the back of one of these Holy Roller Baptist churches where they're all, I've not been the Ebenezer one, I can't remember. But the funny thing is, he really got fascinated by it. He said, these people are really cool. And he just was really fascinated by the Baptists, and he was fascinated by the Jewish religion. We were Boy Scouts together, and they used to need 10 people or a minion in order to do Kaddish when somebody had passed away and they were doing the services. And he used to always volunteer, and he'd put on the yarmulke, and he'd go there and he'd try and read the Hebrew or whatever. So I think maybe he was kind of leaning towards becoming Jewish, although we did have our own religion. He and I started called Ben Cooperism. It was small, there were only 2 of us, so the donations weren't all that great. But we had a lot of fun doing that, and we were very spiritual. We just had a ball. I mean, he was so much fun, and there was nothing he wouldn't try or nothing he wouldn't think. I remember one day he said to me, he said, Jeff, do you think you and I could smoke a whole carton of cigarettes each within 24 hours? He did the math, and he figured that we had to have a cigarette in our hand at least for 22 of the 24 hours. And we said, we're going on a Boy Scout overnight. This is back when Boy Scouts let you do these things. I should tell you that he and I got kicked out for some things that Carl's laughing. He knows why, but we can't talk about that right now. Steve Edlin. But anyway, for those who know that is a joke. But so we each got a carton of cigarettes. He got his Marlboro, I had my Winston. And we each smoked a full carton of cigarettes within 24 hours.
Oh my God.
And our throats were totally gone. I didn't know why we didn't just die of lung cancer at that moment. But we each did that. We used to drink Hiram Walker's Blackberry Brandy, which our Scoutmaster used to have. So we used to do that. And, our Scoutmaster has a funny story about that, I gotta tell you. So our Scoutmaster was a guy that was an ex-Marine from Vietnam, and he was one of these probably PSTD type of guys. He really, he was crazy. So Billy and I said, you know what? We really hate this son of a bitch. And he asked us to make coffee. So we took the coffee pot in the back, and he and I filled it up with pee. Why not? We hated the guy. So we peed in the coffee pot, we filled it up, we put the thing on it, we made the coffee. We didn't realize he saw us doing the whole thing. So we come in and we say, Marty, here's the, we have coffee for you and everything. Good work, boys. I think you should have a cup first. And we're like, no, that's okay. No, I insist. So we were petrified because we figured we'd be drinking coffee. And I mean, we're not Indians, so it wasn't something to be used to. And so we had the coffee, and Billy, at least smartly, knocked the thing over, so we didn't wind up having to do it. But Billy was up for everything. I mean, I can think of one time, I don't know if he ever told anyone about this. I know I've told it since his passing. We were at Greenwich Village, and we had this guy, Josie, who was a gay guy, used to be at Emilio, they call us laughing again, Emilio's Pizza Box. So Josie said, George Shakaris is having a party, and he'd like me to bring you guys with him. Now, for those of you who don't know, George Shakaris was the Sharks, Bernardo Maria's brother in the movie West Side Story. So he was an actor. So Billy and I are saying, this is great. We're going to meet the head of the Sharks from West Side Story. I mean, we figured we're going to go to his house, and there's going to be a party there, and they're going to be dressed up like the hoodlums they were in the movie, and this is going to be the best of the best, and we couldn't wait to go. So Josie takes us over to this 3 story townhouse in Greenwich Village that was owned by George. And we go there, and he opens the door, and he's got this big pink nightgown on with all these feathers and everything, and he has all these guys around him, and he looks at them and says, "Oh, look, we got some fresh meat. Come on in, boys." Well, Billy and I got out of there as soon as we could. I mean, it wasn't like West Side Story. But he just always wanted to try stuff. I mean, there was nothing that scared him. I know we went skydiving together. We had, I'm just trying to look over some of the notes I made here. I used to visit him in Kentucky, and everyone he knew always had a story about him. I mean, he never said, "This is my roommate Joe," and he just a good guy. Nah, everyone around Billy had a story. So, this guy had all kinds of things. He was married twice. He caught his first wife in bed with his second wife, and he didn't think they knew each other. I mean, everyone Billy knew had a story. But what Billy used to hate is he used to hate the people that would knock on their doors and say, "Do you believe in Jesus?" And all these, sell the watchtower. So he had something he used to do all the time. He always had a penthouse there, and he had the penthouse forum. And he would say to them, "I'll let you come in and preach to me about the gospel if you promise to read one of the articles from the penthouse forum." And that was his way of getting the solicitors to leave, except one time. The guy really wanted to preach to us. So he was about 17 years old, and we're in Kentucky, and he comes in, and he says, "Okay, but you promise you're going to let me tell you about Jesus afterwards?" And we said, "Yeah." Well, he handed him the magazine, and sure enough, the kid read it. He finished, he said, "Now." And he took out his Bible and started talking to us, and we had to keep the deal. But that was the only time I think it ever worked that way with Billy. But he always thought of really cool stuff. I mean, he came up with this idea that when you ride a motorcycle, there's people that want to throw you, they want to knock you off the road and whatever. So he used to carry old spark plugs in his pocket. And if somebody was going to cut him off or whatever, he would wing it at the windshield, and it would break the windshield. And he also had a gun that he had on his motorcycle, but he said, "If I do that, I'll probably go to jail. At least I could break the windshield with these old spark plugs." So that was what he would carry around with him all the time. And he would kind of break the windshields. But he always had fun. I mean, the one thing I was telling his children is that as a parent, you can't always tell your kids the same things you tell your best friends. So, they had looked towards me to give some of the old stories, which I've tried to do to some extent. Not a full extent, but to some extent. I know Carl and Dominic probably know most of them. But he just always wanted to have fun, always wanted to try everything. But he was a sensitive guy too. I actually was sitting next to him in music class the day that they announced that President Kennedy was shot. And that got to him. It really bothered him a lot because he had a very sensitive side. He very much loved his family. I mean, we used to tease about his Uncle Nick and some of the crazier members of his family, but he loved them. I mean, we would visit him out in Wading River, and we'd always have a great time. His parents were like parents to me, and I always used to like hanging around with his mother. She was amazing. She always treated me like a son, and I know that we'd come in at 4 a.m. and she'd say, "Where you guys been?" And we'd say, "Well, we were at someone's house, had 2 beers, fell asleep." Meanwhile, we were, at a strip club in New York City or something, or Show World or whatever. And we'd tell her the story, and Bill would tell his mother the story, and then he'd go to bed, and she'd look at me, and she'd say, "I have to put up with that bullshit with my own son. I don't have to put up with you. Where were you?" And I'd tell her. And then she'd say, "Billy, where were you again?" "Oh, I told you, we just had a..." Then she'd say, "Jeff already told me." She'd scream at both of us. So she was wonderful. And his father was great. We just had a wonderful time. But I just can't say enough about just how much he loved life. I mean, he really wanted to do everything. He wasn't afraid of anything. He wasn't, there was nothing that was too off color, too rude, too dangerous. Everything that he wanted to do, and he had the chance to do, he would do. There was nothing that he was really afraid of. And he lived his whole life that way. I mean, he wasn't afraid to be in a fight, and he and I were in many. Never with each other. 56 years, we never had a fight or an argument. But he just wasn't afraid of anything. Anything that anybody had, he would try. He would always want to be someone that got the most out of life. And he lived that way. He was truly a remarkable guy. I can't say enough about him because he just thought differently than other people. Everything he looked at, he tried to fix. I remember he was working at an auto body shop, and he had to put a horn in a car because the other horn didn't work. And he got a new horn, and it didn't work either. So he took the old horn apart, and he rewired it, and he fixed it, he got it to work. And then he opened up a drawer, and he took out a can of black spray paint. And I said, "What's that for?" He says, "Well, this is my new parts department." And he took the old one and he sprayed it black and he put it in the thing, and it worked just fine. But he always had a way of just making things work. So, I'm going to miss him like crazy, but at the same time, I know he's with his parents. I know he's with, his old friends that passed before him. He did believe in the afterlife. He absolutely thought he was going to see his parents when he did die. And he wasn't afraid. He was afraid of the effect it was going to have on the survivors, on his family, but he wasn't personally afraid of it because he really actually was very spiritual. And he knew he got a lot out of life. He really enjoyed it. He was a wild kid like I was. We used to get in trouble. I mean, Carl and my brother, we used to travel all the time. We'd throw TVs out of windows of hotels and smash up, places. And, we weren't angels. I think devil might be a stretch. What's the level below devil? But anyway, that's where we were. But I know he's resting in peace. I'm actually very glad I saw him his last couple of days before he passed. He loved his family so much that he really couldn't face them with the fact he knew he was dying. But he's absolutely at peace, and it's hard to look back at his life and say, gee, I bet he wished he did X, Y, and Z, because he did X, Y, and Z. And he left a trail of people that love him, the people that knew him, the people that worked with him. He always took care of his family, always worked, and he was just a wonderful guy. And I remember being at his daughter Joanna's wedding a couple of years ago. It was one of the proudest moments. He always talked about Alex and his Boy Scouts and his teaching. He absolutely loved his kids, and hopefully they'll come up and talk a little bit about him. But I just kind of want to say in closing that all of you who knew him are really very lucky because you knew a great man. And I knew him all these years. I knew him through good times and bad times. And I don't have sadness because what I have is the blessing of having known him. I mean, you don't always get to do that. You don't always get to have people like Billy in your life. And when you do, to have the opportunity to actually know him as intimately and as well as I knew him and what he loved and what he thought, I mean, I just feel blessed for it. So I'm honored that I had this chance to speak about him. And I thank you all for coming here. And I'll turn the microphone over to Johanna, I believe, who wants to speak, or to Alex.